let's talk about veterans issues, since that's a part of your
course.
background, and of course you're obviously well versed since you have advanced degrees in veterans issues. And Virginia is home to hundreds of thousands of veterans and their families. What are you seeing as the frontline issues for veterans that you want to tackle as United States Senator Daniel Gade?
Yeah, so the first and most important, I think it was Ronald Reagan who said the best welfare program, or the best program to help people have a life, is a job. And so for veterans, particularly those who are just transitioning, or those who are, later in life, you often have another transition when you're in your 50s. Maybe you go from whatever you're doing for the first 30 years and to some other thing for the remainder of your working career. For people at points of transition, they're vulnerable to making suboptimal choices, right? Or to making bad choices. And so to the maximum extent possible, the government has an obligation, and it's a moral obligation, actually, particularly as people leave military service, to train them into their next career. So I always use the analogy of a sword, right? Before somebody goes in the military, they are a productive plow. And then we bring them in and we take them to basic training. We beat them into a sword, and then we use that sword for our own national purposes. And then at the end of their service, we have an obligation, a moral one, to take that sword, even if, like my sword, even if it's dented up and broken a little bit and kind of scratched, we have an obligation to recreate it into a productive plow. So our first focus should be on helping veterans find jobs, recreating themselves to where they are employable in a civilian context, and then helping them get placed in those jobs, because then they can stand up on their own 2 feet. And I only have 1 foot, so I can only stand on 1 foot. But
how often do you run into that?
Pretty
right.
Often.
I only have 1 leg.
Pretty often. What did I say the other? My wife and I crack jokes about that sometimes. But anyway, so I said something like I got off on the wrong foot with somebody, and I was like, well, I'm glad that saying at least matches, because I didn't get off on the wrong feet because I only have 1 foot. Aha. And she's like, okay, I heard it before. But anyway, so help them stand up on their own 2 feet and thrive, and then they can provide for their own families. Then they'll have the dignity and self-worth that comes from a job, instead of being dependent on government, because there's way too much chance of people being dependent on government. And of course, veterans, there's disability payments that are available to people who are seriously injured, and that's totally appropriate. There's health care available to people whose health conditions are related to their military service, and that health care should be low or no cost. It should be accessible. It should be high quality. And so that's something that I care about deeply as well. But I think jobs are first, and then those other benefits come after or during the process of finding somebody a job.
Do we have that same moral obligation to the people that we have educated throughout their K through 12 lives, who have, through whatever suboptimal choice they've made or has been put upon them, to engage with them, to make them useful members of society again? And where do you draw that line? And can you draw that line? Because we've gone through a terrible pandemic in which we are funneling out trillions of dollars that heretofore would have been unthinkable from a fiscal standpoint. Now it's like, well, yeah, we've already done it, so you might as well make some use out of the new programs. Is this a paradigm shift in social services as well, taking your concept and your construct around veterans issues?
Well, I sure hope not, Chris, because the idea of the government always being there with its warm embrace to help you through the hard times and pat you on the back is terribly destructive. Because what we know from history is that there are things that government does well, and there are things that government doesn't do well, and government is never good at caring for the individual. Instead, what we need to do is set up systems that allow individuals to care for themselves and their own families, because you have your own family's best interest at heart, not government. Right. So, whether there's a moral obligation to every citizen, I'd say no, not at the same level as there is to those who fight our nation's wars. So, absolutely. There are, a great example, K through 12. To the extent possible, we ought to be helping get education decisions made at the lowest possible level where families actually are, so that they can thrive on their own terms. I think it's really, really important.
So I was thinking about this today, and on my I was exercising today. I was thinking about, should we go to a, a draft of some sort, or a national service model that creates more of the, you know, as you've done in your life, giving back? Is there a way to do that now with this new paradigm that we're in? And it's like we can do anything we want to because the whole thing is called off before.
Yeah, it's that's a thorny question that comes up a lot. There are some people who've called for mandatory national service, and I'm pretty libertarian, and I don't think you should be forced to serve anybody that you don't want to serve. So the idea of taking away basically 2 years of somebody's life as a offering to the government, and forcing them into a government job for a period of time, and then letting them go about their lives, I think is a bad way to approach that. The goal is good. The way to approach it is not good.
Okay. Again, not forcing them
but what
to,
I would
but
say, I think, but if it's going to be mandatory service, that the word mandatory means, force.
no, I
right?
never presumed mandatory. I'm just saying, should we have that model available for kids who don't want to go to college, who are not ready for college, who don't want to go to the workforce just yet, and say, look, I want to give back, and here's an opportunity. I'm a freedom-loving, non-forcing kind of guy myself when it comes to these kind of things. I'm just saying there seems to be an opportunity for a model because a lot of people want to give back to their country right now, especially in these difficult times.
Yeah, I think that's great. Actually, that's the right approach. There's a lot of people who are done with high school but not quite yet ready for college, and so taking a gap year, having a structured gap year type program or set of incentives, where, for example, if you do a gap year with a nonprofit that serves inner city youth or something, you are preferentially admitted to the most elite colleges or something like that. So that way, it's not just children of privilege who get into Harvard; it's children who are willing to work their tails off and serve others who who are smart who get into Harvard. I think there's some real opportunities there that are worth exploring, and I'm interested in that topic. I haven't thought too deeply about it, but I have been involved with some people who are thoughtful, and I'd love to reach out to them.